We want to thank everyone for taking the time to meet with us today to discuss our QuickBooks Online integration with our RedTeam Flex project management software. My name is Riley. I'm an account executive here at RedTeam, and we have Lucas on the call as well. He's our subject matter expert. He's going to walk us through a demonstration of what the QuickBooks Online integration looks like with RedTeam Flex. We understand how important it is to have a seamless integration for your accounting systems. And so QuickBooks Online is one of our most popular integrations that we see with companies that we work with. And so today we're going to do a high level overview of what that integration looks like. And we're excited to show you what we have to offer. So with that being said, I will pass it over to Lucas, who is going to share his screen and start a quick demonstration for you.
Okay, thank you, Riley. Yes, I'm Lucas Stram, a product owner with RedTeam for financial and accounting integration components. And what I want to talk to you a little bit about today is how RedTeam Flex works with QuickBooks Online and how that integration is set up and how it kind of works in a day-to-day perspective, moving things from place to place, and how it kind of helps you bring together everything that you need between the two systems. So if you're attending this, you're probably fairly familiar with Red Team. We're born out of a general contractor's need for accounting integration, and actually, this QuickBooks integration was the very first accounting integration we did, directly built out of a need to have that more direct integration, avoiding manual double entry in a lot of places to conveniently kind of get things to go flow back and forth without any sense of having to input it separately. So I'm going to go ahead and let's take this down here for a second and switch over to Red Team. So one of the first things I want to talk a little bit about is how this connection gets up and running. And one of the nice things about QuickBooks is that it is built off the shelf to be a very easy to work with system in terms of integrations, user friendliness and things like that. And that applies to how we're able to connect to it as well. I mean, basically it's a matter of getting connected in, signed in on it, and as far as setting it up, the bulk of the things that need to get handled with that is going to be making sure we've got a set of control accounts that match to specific GL accounts within QuickBooks. That's kind of a main part of it. Besides that, we want to make sure to link up vendors and customers that kind of connect between the two systems, so that for any that already exist, we've got them connected up, so it's not creating duplicates at that point. And basically, that's the core of it. There's a couple of other things along those lines that we set up as well. But once you've got those control accounts set up, the associated related accounts, if you're doing employee time and expenses, for example, you've got your vendors linked up and everything. At that point, basically off to the races. And in terms of how this integration works, it's very automated and it's kind of just built into the normal Red Team workflow in terms of how this operates. So within Red Team Flex, you're going to be handling a lot of different things, and in terms of how this works with QuickBooks, the places where it's going to be touching on, the main areas are going to be vendor invoicing, customer invoicing, employee expenses, and employee time. And so that's going to kind of be where we'll focus our main attention on right now. And so one of the things that ties into that, Red Team, it's built to handle vendor commitments, purchase orders, subcontracts, vendor changes, all of those various components. And so those get entered into Red Team, they get built out. They're built out with whatever line items and cost codes and everything that they have associated with them. And then beyond that point, you're going to start receiving invoices for those various vendor commitments. And that kind of is the beginning of where typically the Red Team QuickBooks integration will come into play. So moving over from those commitments into the vendor invoices might get entered into Red Team in a lot of different ways. I could be entering them directly myself, or I could have an intern who's doing data entry, putting everything in there, making sure that things are properly coded to the correct vendor, correct commitment, or whatever. I might be mass importing them via a spreadsheet. I might be having the vendor enter them themselves via the Team Player app. Regardless of the nature of how those vendor invoices get put into Red Team, they come into Red Team, they start to go through an approvals process. Basically, it's what it's going to come down to in terms of how this is going to interact with QuickBooks is it's all about changes in status, kind of event-driven transactions. And in the case of vendor invoices, it's going to come based on moving an invoice from draft into committed status. That's going to push it through into QuickBooks in a pending approval state. Then that's going to go through an approvals process in RedTeam, going through various steps. And if I go ahead and pull one of these invoices up, so as an approver, I might be looking at the various line items that are included. I can, accept or dispute individual lines if I need to. If I have particular comments I want to make about them, I can leave comments, whatever. And as I go through this, eventually I'm going to get to kind of a final approval step where I'm going to rate the vendor potentially, leave comments about that vendor, and mark any final approval notes. And then I could reject this back down to the previous level. I could reject and cancel it, send it back to the vendor and, say, hey, there's some kind of problem with this invoice. You're going to need to resend it to us. Or I have the option to approve it. And if I'm at the end of the line here, like I am in here as an administrator approver, I can check this box to execute, click approve. And when I execute and approve this, it'll push that updated information to QuickBooks so that this goes in on the QuickBooks side of things and can be ready to be paid. So that's kind of the first step of things pushing through. Things are going to go into QuickBooks, and when they do, they're going to go in, be associated with that vendor on the QuickBooks side of things. They're going to be put in there with whatever line items I have associated with whatever details. In this case, it's a vendor retainage release. So they have this just has a retainage line that it's releasing to. And when this gets paid, the payment for this information is going to flow back into RedTeam. It's going to update that information on the RedTeam side of things. And one of the ways that's really important is if you look here in this view icon, we've got a payables aging report. And so here I can pull up a report that's going to show me payables aging based on each individual different kind of vendor that I'm working with, whatever invoices that I have associated with them, how much was approved, how much is being retained, what's the payable amount, has it been paid, is it current, is it past due? It's going to show me all of that detail without needing to go into the accounting system. So I've got all that information kind of coming back in here. And because we're receiving those payment receipt information, it's going to help me update that so that the project management team can see all that without needing to go into accounting. And so that's kind of the first aspect of it, that back and forth between vendor invoices. So, vendor invoices get entered into RedTeam, they get approved, they get pushed to QuickBooks, they get paid in QuickBooks, flow back into RedTeam with the receipt, and that's that whole process right there. Customer billing kind of works in the same fashion, where on the RedTeam side of things, I can enter in a progress billing or really any billing, T&M billing, whatever, regardless of the billing type and the project type. I can be putting in all of my details here. I can be updating my amounts, whether I'm doing it by percentages or dollar amounts or whatever I need to be updating those amounts to include as I go through and I update all my amounts. This is gonna let me fill out all my details for my progress billing, and I'm gonna have all of this together in a form that I can pass along to my customer. So I'll have that that document that I can generate from the RedTeam side of things. And this here would be an example of just like a memo billing. And with it, regardless of how I'm putting together those progress bills, as far as sending it to QuickBooks, this is going to be a matter of that same thing of changing the status that triggers an event that sends it. So in this case, when I'm done with this billing, however, like maybe I realize, oh, I've got this in the wrong format, I need to change it. As long as it's in draft, that's fine. I can edit things and change things out. Whatever I finalize my bill with, and I decide this is good, I check all my amounts, make sure that I've got what it needs to be. And when I put this into committed status, it's going to pass this along and push it into QuickBooks. So with it, that's going to go in there. With the integration, it's going to automatically trigger a send, but it does take a few minutes for things to process through. But we can look at a previous bill there, and so basically with it, it's going to send it into QuickBooks to be handled by the accounting team in the same fashion. With it, basically what it's going to do, it's going to pull up the customer billing, and it's going to let us apply payment against it. Oh, there we go. Excellent. Okay, so this is the bill that I just sent through. As soon as QuickBooks opens with it. There it is. There we go. That customer invoice, I'll have it in here on the QuickBooks side of things, associated with the customer that it's tied to. And as a side note, just for reference, the way RedTeam is going to push through projects is we're going to send them in as sub customers, and that's just part of the nature of the QuickBooks integration. QuickBooks does have a project entity, and once we push a sub customer through, it could be converted into a project entity after the fact, but there's just not an API component to create a project from the RedTeam side of things. So in this case, it's going through to the sub customer associated with the project, which is located under the primary customer for the project. And when this goes through, this can be paid. Once that's all paid, that payment information is going to flow back into RedTeam, update everything on the RedTeam side of things so that we'll update our received amounts, update our balances, and similarly to the AP side of things, we've got receivables aging reports that are going to show us that information. What bills have been paid, what's the remaining retainage balance, what's past due, etc. And so that's the AP and the AR side of things. As an additional aspect of it, RedTeam has tools for tracking employee expenses as well. And with it, that's something that's going to tie in a similar fashion where just like we were talking about before with the vendor invoicing and the customer billing, it's all going to be handled as part of that change in status. So when I have employee expenses that are going to be created against a particular employee, go ahead and pull some up here. So these employee expenses, these could be entered into the RedTeam site on the desktop. They could be entered via the mobile app, regardless of how they're getting put in. Once these employee expenses are moved from a draft status into a committed status, and they can be routed for an approval before that point potentially. A couple of different ways to handle employee expenses, but regardless of how you're handling them as kind of a workflow, it's that change in status that triggers that send. So I commit this, and it will trigger a push to push this through into the QuickBooks side of things from RedTeam, similar to the way that we would push the other ones, where it's just that change in status, just part of the normal workflow. You change that status, and it triggers the send. The same thing applies to timesheets as well. So if I start up a timesheet, and once I enter in whatever my details for it might be against whatever project I'm working on, whatever cost code I may be working with, I can put all my details in here. In this case, this is an unauthorized timesheet where I'm entering in the coding myself. But if I have a labor authorization in advance, I'll have that to enter in beforehand. And when I put in all my details for this timesheet, it'll push details for that that labor payroll cost into QuickBooks if you're using RedTeam to handle those timesheets as well. And it's that same situation where when I uh, when I commit this, that's what's going to trigger the send. So that's really the core four aspects of the accounting integration for the purposes of the QuickBooks integration: accounts payable, accounts receivable, employee expenses, employee time. As far as a couple of other ancillary things, just to kind of toss out there for reference, with the QuickBooks integrations, we do have a couple of different versions of the integrations that are a couple different versions of the QuickBooks that we work with. One of which is QuickBooks Plus, the other one is QuickBooks Advanced. They're effectively, for the purposes of RedTeam. Oh, see, now QuickBooks is deciding to open open me attempting to click through those. Um, so as far as what QuickBooks Plus and Advanced do differently, it's not a huge change in terms of how they operate. The main difference that we would see, I'm going to actually pull up a vendor bill here and show it really quickly. So if I click through on this vendor bill, okay, here we go. So I've got a vendor bill opened up. This actually is the version I have open is QuickBooks Plus. If I had QuickBooks Advanced active right now, the only difference that I would see there is I would have my division name listed as a location. I would have whatever cost codes that I have in here for this line item on the vendor invoice associated as class. So it would give me a couple extra points of detail, but otherwise the integration is largely unchanged. So that's really the main aspects of the back and forth with it. Again, accounts payable, accounts receivable, uh, employee expenses, employee time, pushing those details through so that they fill out on the QuickBooks side, and pulling payment information back into RedTeam so that we can update the reporting on our side as well. And yeah, to reiterate, it's all kind of just event driven, part of the normal workflows that are included with RedTeam Flex. Even if you didn't have an accounting integration, this would generally be the way that you'd be handling these components anyways. So with that, that's effectively all of the main components that I wanted to cover. A couple of secondary things, RedTeam has tools for kind of, tracking and verifying things. One thing I've got up top is I've got a little transaction indicator, so I can see if there are any transactions of concern. If something, hasn't gone through for some reason, I can look and see what's going on there. I can also see that information in the app card too. So it just gives me some validation of what's happening. I can go to this transactions log here, and I can see every individual transaction that's gone through from RedTeam to QuickBooks and QuickBooks to RedTeam, so that I can see what's going where, who's triggering these things, who's pushing things through. And sometimes that can help from a workflow perspective. If something got sent before you wanted it to go, it's important to know who pushed it. And so I can see the user that did that, and I can see details of what's happening here. So, in this case, in this particular transaction, somebody set up an account type incorrectly. And so that's why that particular transaction failed. So I can kind of see that information if I need to. So this is going to give me various details of what's happening, transactions that are going through, when they're going, and who's sending them, and all of that. So this helps give me that validation, that peace of mind. Now, did anybody have any questions about anything that they might want to ask?
I'll pause one more minute, see if anybody wants to ask anything. If not, just want to say thank you, Lucas, for walking us through what that integration looks like. Of course, we'll be happy to share this with anybody who's joined and with anybody who in the future is interested in learning more about our QuickBooks Online integration. So thank you all so much for your time. Lucas, thank you so much for walking us through that. And we look forward to continuing the conversation with all of you in the future.